Columbus knew, and he kept the book of the Apocrypha, which is in the book of Esdras. And he knew about the prophecy that was in the book of Esdras concerning the 10 tribes. So it wasn't there wasn't like a real big, how would you say, a real big hoopla about it, because he already knew, based off of the book of Ezra inside the Apocrypha, that a lot of those priests and those monks back there, they didn't want to deal with that. But this is a part of the history of our people. Now in the book of Ezra, it's the 13th chapter, starting at the 40th verse. 2nd Ezra 13 and 40. It says, those are the 10 tribes, like we was reading about in our book, Lost Tribes and Promised Lands with Ronald Sanders, where Columbus was reiterating about the 12 tribes and how they were divided into 12 parts, and 10 parts was given to Jeroboam and the other 2 parts was given to Rehoboam. He knew about that. So now in the Apocrypha it says, those are the 10 tribes which are carried away prisoners out of their own land, and the time of Hosea the king, whom Salmanazar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so came they into another land. That land that they went into is what we know today as America, the land of America. So that's the land that they came into. It says, but they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. Where the country where never mankind dwelt is America. The other land that they went into was talking about the land of the Assyrians, because they were led into the Assyrian captivity. Then they took a counsel among themselves while they were in the Assyrian captivity, that they were going to go to a further land where never mankind dwelt. And it says that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. It says, for the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of 1.5 years. And the same region is called Arsareth. Now, it took the tribes 1.5 years when they went in through the Euphrates River. They came into the Indian Ocean, sailed under the Horn of Africa, and then they sailed up north into the Atlantic. And they dispersed in South America, Central America, North America, and the different islands, Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, so on and so forth. That's where the tribes dispersed at when they left during the Assyrian captivity through the Euphrates River. Now, the reason why the tribes went that way, and Columbus knew about this also. That's why he had the book of Ezra in his possession, and he kept reading the book of Ezra about the account of where the tribes went. He knew that. Now, during the time of King Solomon, going back to the book of Kings, the 10th chapter, which this is before the tribes left under the Assyrian captivity and came over here to the Americas. In the book of Kings 10 and 22, it says, so King Solomon, it says, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Once in 3 years. So now we read in the Apocrypha where it said it took them 1.5 years to get to where they were going. Solomon's navy, every 3 years they came back with a bounty from the country that they went to, which that country was here, the Americas, what you call the Americas, because they went that same route. That's how the tribes knew to take that route, because it was an already proven route. So every 3 years, Solomon rejoiced because a bounty came back of wood, apes, ivory, peacocks. The bounty would come back every 3 years. And that was used to beautify his home, to build the temple, and Jerusalem itself. So that's showing you right there that Columbus had knowledge and he had information about the tribes coming this way, and it's based off of the Apocrypha. Now, there's some more information that I want to touch on in a book called, it's called World Explorer Far Out Adventures is the name of this book. And page 135. The title is The Columbus Mystery. It says, with this year's 500th anniversary, so this particular article was written back in 1992, which was to commemorate the 500-year anniversary of Columbus sailing over here to the New World. So I'm going to just read the heading. It says, with this year's 500th anniversary of Columbus' first voyage to America, controversy rages as to Columbus' place in history and whether to honor him or damn him. But even more controversial is the question of his true identity. Amazing evidence exists that Columbus may actually have been a Spanish Jew, which that's what he was, who was forced to disguise his identity, and moreover, that he possessed ancient maps of the Atlantic and already knew where he was going. So that opens a whole nother can of worms to the theory about they were looking for a new route to get to India to get spices. They wasn't looking to go to India for a goddamn thing, because they knew the way to India from where they were at in Portugal. He was looking to come over here and enslave the tribes, the 10 tribes that were over here in the Americas, because he had maps and possessed maps. And the maps that he possessed, and I'm going to read some information on it, the maps that he possessed went back to the Viking voyages, to the time of 1070 AD. And you'll probably hear the name Leif Erikson. Going back to and that was 400 and maybe 22 years before he sailed over this way. They had already established and set up trade routes with the Native American Indians. And they were the ones who basically mapped out Canada, North, Central, South America, and on different islands. They were the ones that mapped all that out, almost 500 years before Christopher Columbus came on the scene. Now you might say, what evidence do you have to back that, to back a statement like that? I'm going to read it. Because in the same book, there was there were a numerous amount of people that were behind Columbus and that backed him and financed him on his maiden voyage over here to the Americas. Now, one person in particular I'm going to read about, because it's going to give you the information in a nutshell. Okay, the guy's name is Martin Alonzo Pinzon. Now, this guy, Martin Alonzo Pinzon, I'm just going to read the history on it. Martin Alonzo Pinzon, a wealthy ship owner of Palos. Pinzon was responsible for Colon's acquisition of the Nina and the Pinta, and for hiring the crew for the expedition. Garcia Fernandez, steward of the Pinta, stated that Martin Alonzo knows that without his giving the 2 ships to the admiral, he would not have been where he was, nor would he have found people, because nobody knew that the said admiral, and that by reason of the said Martin Alonzo, and through his said ships, the said admiral made the said voyage. Some historians suggest that Pinzon was the actual leader of the expedition to the New World, and that Colon was merely a front because of his favor with the Spanish monarchs. As later captain of the Pinta, Pinzon was second in command to Colon. That's something that they're never going to tell you when you go to your public fool system about Christopher Columbus. And Columbus Day is maybe within the next 2.5 weeks from now, which would be, what is it, October 5th? Or is it October 6th? One of them 2 days is basically Columbus Day. And we're going to be hearing all that garbage over the airwaves. It says, the steward's letter reconciles with accepted facts. Pinzon's descendants tried for a half century. That means 50 years. They tried for a half century to obtain some of the honors and wealth which had gone to Colon. It says, in the series of lawsuits recorded, it was disclosed that Colon had access to the Vatican archives. No one can just get access to the Vatican archives, not back then, and even not now to this present day. As a matter of fact, if you go over there to the Vatican, their library, they have armed guards with machine guns guarding the library. It's only a library. Why is it the average person can't go into the Vatican library? What is and what are they hiding in the Vatican library? Well, Columbus had access to it. This is something that they're not going to tell you in history. So I'm going to read it again. In a series of lawsuits, because Martin Alonzo Pinzone's ancestors were trying to get monies and royalties and things that was that Colon received, because he was one of the financiers behind him that was not given any credit. So they were looking to receive monies and receive credit for things that took place back in 1492. This is basically 50 years after, which would be around the 1540s somewhere. In the series of lawsuits recorded, it was disclosed that Cologne had access to the Vatican archives, which contained records of Viking voyages over a period of several centuries, probably including the original of the famed Vinland map, of which Yale University has a 20th century copy. It also indicated that Pinzone had obtained from Rome information about lands to the west of the Atlantic. The west of the Atlantic, what's the land west of the Atlantic Ocean? Canada, North America, Central, South America, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Trinidad, Haiti, and what you call the Virgin Islands. Those are the lands that are west of the Atlantic. It says Pinzone was able to get Cologne to alter his course on October 6th. And I believe that's the day that they celebrate as Columbus Day. I believe it's October 6th. It says, what better reason would the admiral have for accepting the urging of a subordinate than the fact that Pinzone had been there before? So that right there should open up, that's going to open up a can of worms, and it should shed some light on the subject of this devil, the mystery or shroud about this devil Christopher Columbus. That he didn't discover America, because number one, this land was already cultivated and populated by the 12 tribes of Israel, or let me say the 10 tribes, which he knew came over here during the Assyrian captivity, because he was an avid reader of the Apocrypha, and he believed in the book of Esdras and the Apocrypha. And then also he had maps that showed the lands west of the Atlantic. So showing you that that whole thing about them trying to find another way to India, it was a damn lie and it was a hoax. And he was basically coming over here to enslave the 10 tribes of Israel. That's why also when he came over here as a sidebar, he had a Hebrew scholar with him. His name was Luis de Torres. And he was the Hebrew interpreter that Columbus brought with him over here in 1492 on the maiden voyage coming to the Americas. And why would he bring a Hebrew interpreter with him over here to the New World if he wasn't expecting to run into people that speak Hebrew, which would be Israelites? So with that, that'll conclude this lesson. Shalom.